And I just want to, if possible, I don't know how interactive you want to be as an audience, but just get a show of hands for how many of you are actually aware of where the space industry is heading right now and why the space industry is such a huge opportunity for investors and a place where, the sky is no longer the limit. This is, your first trillionaire will likely come from the space industry. Is there an awareness in the audience yet? So some Starlink, yes, it's an example with SpaceX. Can you just set the scene of almost like the conundrum we have with space, because we know we need to reduce cost of access to space, then we need to learn how to manufacture in space, we need to clean up debris in spaces, we need to do so many things, we need to have more opportunities to analyze the data which comes from space. Is it almost a case of a 3D jigsaw puzzle we need to solve before we can step forward? And where are the real exciting areas, particularly for investors right now?
I think that 3D jigsaw puzzle is a really nice way of looking at it, because anytime when you're emerging into a new sector or into a new paradigm of business, everywhere you see challenges, but at the same time, those are then your opportunities. That's what creates an opportunity for another business to come in and solve those challenges so that everyone can then move forward. And so these challenges of space debris, we know that for the last 50 years we've been putting things up into space, and some of them have broken down, and we've got little flecks of paint that are floating around, and we know because of the speeds that things are moving, they have the power to actually break through 7 inches of glass on a space shuttle, which we've seen. Fortunately, the glass is 11 inches thick, but we've seen flecks of plate break through 7 inches into that glass just because of the speeds at which everything's moving around up there. So space is big. And if you think of it, it's like an onion layer. How big our oceans are. So space is like an onion layer of oceans going up. So there is a lot of space there, but it's that speed that things are moving at that's the challenge. So we've got to get much better at understanding what's up there, being able to track it, being able to and remove it when we no longer need it. And there's all sorts of other challenges up there that.
I think I would go a bit more sort of towards the fundamental side and actually say that the space industry that's emerging now feels that it needs to answer societal problems as well as, that's part of the 3 or 4D jigsaw puzzle that we're challenged with. So it's not just, and I think the most fundamental question that we still have to answer as an industry within the context of the UK is, what is space? Why space? Because again, it's one of these things that on the whole has always been an arm's length away from particularly people in society in the UK. It's always something done in the US. We don't really understand it. We don't really understand what the benefits and the opportunities are. If you're lucky, yes, you think you know about GPS, you know that your banking transactions don't work if a satellite's down. But no one has quite got yet to the level, or well, the situation we are seeing with the new constellations and internet coming from space, we haven't quite got to the level of banality where, oh, it's that OneWeb satellite that's down again and my internet's not working. It's these challenges that we are building this new infrastructure up there, which is space. What does space mean to us? And what can we get out of it? I think, again, Stuart mentioned some of the companies that we have which are real national champions in capturing that Earth observation data. In fact, one of the things for me, again, a realization of someone relatively new to the space industry, I was blown away by the level of sophistication of data scientists in the environmental agencies of the United Kingdom, both devolved and centralized. The level that they have of understanding of data and what data sets they need to get in order to improve the management systems of our environment is quite remarkable. It's not just that we're leading in the world in satellite manufacture, we're leading the world in the interpretation of the data that comes out of it.
Is data king in the space sector in terms of investment as well and money to be made? Because you hear, particularly bandied around in the US, the first trillionaire will come from someone who's utilized space-based data. Would you say that's the strongest market in the foreseeable
I think, yes,
future?
so it's definitely data, it's cyber security, it's quantum computing, and the ability to create a secure network end-to-end from space. I think these areas are particularly interesting. From obviously coming back to my point of view, it's my ability, the logistics service provider's ability to put those satellites, that infrastructure in place and to maintain it. And again, coming all the way back to the very beginning, as we said, it's what ultimately the service that Skyrora is looking to provide is those 2 little white vans, the logistics service provider, with a maintenance person inside that white van to make sure that the satellites on orbit the OneWeb, the internet, don't stay down for long, and we can be ensured, as Stuart said, we have a continuous internet provision or whatever that service is. So yeah, as I said, it's putting this into practical, understandable terms, demonstrating what the use is that we get out of it, what the opportunity is, and then what we're doing as an industry on top of that to be aligned and very much engaged with COP26, the route to net zero, how we're reducing CO2 emissions, what it is we're doing, not just to support that as an industry in our service provision, but also what are we doing in our companies ourselves to make that happen. And I think that's the fourth dimension of that jigsaw puzzle, which is very interesting to solve.
And is data king? I think that's a really interesting question. And
are you going to give an interesting answer?
Well, I hope so. I mean, the challenge that we've been wrestling with really for the last 10 years, and this is where the government and the private sector have been working together, is that the cost comes in putting the satellites in orbit and the launch and getting that infrastructure in place. Then you have quite a complex supply chain of the infrastructure providers, the service providers, the applications developers, and then the value gets created in the end users at the end. So the big question for investors is who within that supply chain is capturing the value of that's being created, and how do you get that? How do you get that value translated into the cost that can then invest in the infrastructure going in the first place? So, and the reason why I think it's so interesting, I mentioned it in my opening remarks, that we've seen a massive uplift in the infrastructure side now, and I think that's showing that supply chain is getting mature, and that the investors are betting that it's the infrastructure providers are going to be the ones who actually manage to secure that value, and I don't think that's a bad bet. Now, I think there's going to be very many good service companies and profitable service companies, and I think they're probably the lower risk investments, and so they're a much easier way to get into the sector and to get to understand how the space sector works. And there's a lot of companies around who are doing that at the moment. The people who are for example, producing services to ESG investors, people who want to understand the environmental sustainability and governance of their portfolios, which is obviously a big driver in investing at the moment. But I think actually it's going to be those infrastructure providers that are the ones who are able to generate the most value from what they're doing.
Did you want to pick up?
To be truly successful as a society and as a country, I do think that we need to start looking at changing the risk profile of the investors in the UK into what's happening. What do I mean by that? High risk, high opportunity, big return? Question mark. What's the return? The return, as we said, we're already thinking in the terms of environmental social governance. We're talking about CO2 emissions. One of the other areas that we can return on very quickly, given the dynamic and the change and the pace that we as a company are also demonstrating, we're creating 400 jobs. We're currently at 130. We need to have 400 in-house employees by the end of next year. That's to sustain this is the infrastructure cost that Stuart was talking about, but this is also, the challenge that we're faced with is also, where are we going to get the extra 1,000 jobs to support the supply chain around that? Is it easy? Is it an easy, quick fix to change from aerospace engineers, the Rolls-Royce people, and the infrastructure who are laid off because of COVID, lack of transport, lack of aircraft manufacturing? It's not that easy. There is a piece of work to be done around the skill set to transfer that skill set into the space industry, and we do see an opportunity again around changing the paradigm of government investment into, rather than specific fixed assets, but actually into skills and agility of the workforce, so that actually we can redeploy. We can use space as a way to help get our workforce much more agile, redeployable, and involving not just opportunities around other sectors. I think the point I'm trying to make in terms of the risk profile is actually we need to be much more familiar with the opportunity of successful failure. And that's the reason why, again, part of the comprehensive spending review and the budget that was announced, there is this concept, this idea of the Advanced Research Invention Agency copying the DARPA model such that in order for us to be disruptive and innovative as a society, we need to be, as I said, comfortable with investing 90% of the money that we invest should be into failure and 10% should be into success. There needs to be much more money coming into this kind of idea for us to be able to capitalize on the huge, vast opportunity of great ideas and creative minds that we have in the UK, to be able to uplift them and to transform that economy. I think it's happening. As I said, the Advanced Research Invention Agency should be starting to work, I believe, in the very near future. I assume it's going to be in harmony with the Catapult structure, because that, again, would be, well, as part of the development opportunity around the UK. But I think there's still a transition to that point, and it's very much on the risk profile that it's focused on.
And one of the, I guess, the huge hurdles and what kind of differentiates the UK from the US, or certainly has done in the past, is, first of all, when we think of space exploration, we think of the Musks, we think of the Bezos, we think of these market-creating investors, super angel investors who are hugely high net worth individuals, whereas now we're seeing space become more mainstream. How do we open up space investment to more people? What is the current market worth? And do you think there's a culture shift? I know you touched on that briefly, Alan, but a culture shift which needs to happen towards risk and failure, because if we're going to generate these companies, if we're going to have the next Elon Musk, the next Jeff Bezos, we need to change something culturally within the UK in order to stimulate that.
The simple answer to the next Elon Musk was, when Elon was here, why is he not still in the UK? I believe the answer is not a return on investment, it was a return on his idea. It's the ability to move from specific financial returns into creativity and dream returns, which sounds a bit kind of abstract, but that was the metric that Elon, I believe, took the decision not to stay in the UK and relocated himself back onto to the US. But maybe that's a challenge, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a common. It's often said that UK investors are more risk averse than US investors, and that's that's one of the challenges that we have. I'm not tended to subscribe to that. I think we have one of the most sophisticated investment environments in the world here in the UK, and I think if the system was able to produce a way of reliably getting returns from investing in deep tech, then I think we would find it. I think there are exceptions, and I think the reason is that the risk-reward profile works slightly different here than it does in the UK, and I think we need to do more to understand why that is. And I think, particularly for where you have areas which are, the most disruptive technologies, where you have quite high levels of market risk, particularly in the space sector, what we see is that the US government is willing to come in, and this was certainly the case for Elon Musk when he set up SpaceX. They're willing to come in and be that customer for you, to be your anchor customer, so that mitigates your market risk, and so that enables the investors to invest with a bit more confidence, knowing that there is a market.
Of course, SpaceX only takes a few angel investors. They don't really.
I think, I mean, they've opened up recently. I think they had a sort of quite a big, wide investment round, which certainly opened to London investors sort of late last year, I think. But most of that is private. It's certainly not listed. So I think we need to do a bit more to understand, the risk-reward equation here in the UK. But there are ways of investing now. I think there's lots of angels networks around. There is some of you might have heard of the Seraphim Investment Fund. I mean, that's a publicly traded investment fund run by the Seraphim Network, which started out as a venture capital fund and then sort of listed as an investment fund just this last summer. And so that's publicly traded. So that's a very simple way of dipping your toe in the water and sort of tracking it and looking at their investments, because that's all obviously public.
And how would someone go about investing in the Seraphim Fund?
So it's available via all the investment platforms, Hargreaves and Hargreaves Lansdown and all the major platforms. Their fund is available on it, so it's pretty straightforward. And they have a website which lists all their investments and what their strategy is, and so you can use that to make an assessment as whether that matches your risk profile or not.